Hello there and welcome to the Dreamy Science channel. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Tonight, we're traveling back through time to ancient Greece, where gods walked among mortals and every mountain, river, and forest held sacred meaning. We'll explore the most peaceful and beautiful aspects of Greek mythology, the stories that speak of harmony, love, and the gentle rhythms of nature. Some of what you hear may surprise you with its tenderness. Other tales might simply wash over you like warm waves on a quiet shore, soothing and timeless. If these calm explorations through ancient wisdom help you unwind or give you a peaceful way to end your day, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps other weary souls find their way here too, one restful night at a time. The ancient Greeks believed that before anything else existed, there was only peaceful silence. In the beginning, according to their creation myths, there was chaos, but not the violent disorder we might imagine today. The word chaos comes from the Greek word meaning a vast, empty space, like a gentle void filled with infinite potential. It wasn't destruction or turmoil, but rather a quiet, primordial stillness from which all things would eventually emerge. Picture it as the ultimate state of rest, a cosmic sleep before the universe awakened. From this peaceful emptiness came Gaia, the earth herself, not through violence or struggle, but through a natural, gentle unfolding. Gaia was imagined as the ultimate mother, patient and nurturing, providing a foundation for all life. She didn't create through force, but simply by existing. She became the source of mountains, valleys, seas, and all the beautiful landscapes that would shelter countless generations. The ancient Greeks saw her as eternally calm, enduring, and kind, a divine presence who could be felt in every soft hillside and fertile field. Hypnos was the gentle god of sleep itself, and his story is one of the most soothing in all of mythology. Unlike many Greek gods who were associated with drama and conflict, Hypnos lived quietly in a cave where no sunlight ever entered, and no sound could disturb the perfect peace. The cave was surrounded by poppies and other sleep-inducing plants, and at its entrance flowed Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, whose waters helped wash away the worries of the day. Hypnos had two sons, Morpheus, who brought dreams, and Aeschylus, who brought peaceful, dreamless sleep. Together, they ensured that mortals could find rest and restoration every night. The ancient Greeks understood that sleep was not just a necessity, but a gift from the gods. They believed that during sleep, the soul could travel to peaceful realms and receive wisdom from divine sources. This is why they built temples to Asclepius, the god of healing, where people would come to sleep and dream of cures for their ailments. These temples were designed as places of ultimate tranquility, with healing springs, gardens filled with herbs, and sacred serpents that were believed to bring prophetic dreams. In the realm of love, the Greeks told beautiful stories of gentle romance that blossomed slowly and naturally. Psyche and Eros shared a love story that, while it had its challenges, ultimately spoke to the power of patient devotion and trust. Psyche, whose name means soul, was a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty who captured the heart of Eros, the god of love. Their relationship began in mystery, with Eros visiting Psyche only in darkness, speaking to her with a voice like honey. and touching her with the gentleness of a summer breeze. The story teaches that true love requires faith and patience, qualities that bring peace rather than turmoil. When Psyche finally saw her beloved in the light, she discovered not a monster as she had feared, but the most beautiful of all gods. Their eventual union blessed her with immortality, and together they had a daughter named Voluptas, which means pleasure or delight. Their love story reminds us that the most profound connections often grow quietly, like flowers opening slowly in the warmth of spring sunshine. The ancient Greeks believed that certain places on earth were so peaceful that they served as direct connections to the divine. These sacred groves and springs were watched over by gentle spirits called nymphs. The naiads lived in freshwater springs and rivers, ensuring that the water remained pure and healing. They were depicted as young women with flowing hair like water itself, singing soft songs that could lull travelers to sleep and heal their weary hearts. The dryads dwelled within trees, particularly oak trees, which were sacred to Zeus. But these tree spirits were not the powerful, sometimes frightening beings we might expect. Instead, they were gentle guardians who whispered wisdom through rustling leaves and provided shade and shelter for anyone who needed rest. They lived for hundreds of years, growing wise and peaceful as their trees grew tall and strong. To sleep beneath a tree protected by a dryad was considered one of the most restful experiences possible. The Oreads were mountain nymphs who lived in caves and high meadows, places where the air was clear and the silence profound. They were said to dance in moonlight on remote peaks, their movements as graceful as falling snow. Dasburoi reminded the ancient Greeks that there were places in the world where peace reigned supreme, far from the concerns of daily life. The story of Demeter and Persephone, while often told as a tale of sorrow and loss, actually contains some of the most beautiful imagery of seasonal peace in all of mythology. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was known for her nurturing nature and her ability to make crops grow abundantly. She represented the peaceful satisfaction of a successful harvest, the contentment that comes from having enough food stored away for winter. When Persephone returned from the underworld each spring, her reunion with her mother was celebrated as a time of gentle renewal. The earth would slowly wake from its winter sleep, and flowers would push through the soil with quiet determination. The first green shoots of grain would appear in the fields, and fruit trees would bloom with delicate blossoms that filled the air with sweet fragrance. This cycle of rest and renewal taught the ancient Greeks that there is wisdom in allowing periods of dormancy, times when the earth and the soul can restore themselves. The sacred island of Delos was believed to be one of the most peaceful places in the ancient world. According to myth, this small island in the Aegean Sea was the birthplace of Apollo, the god of music, poetry, and healing, and his twin sister Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the moon. The island was said to have been floating freely in the ocean until Zeus anchored it to provide a safe haven for the birth of these important deities. Delos became known as a place where no violence could occur. It was neutral ground where enemies could meet in peace, where the sick could come for healing, and where pilgrims could worship without fear. The island was covered in sacred groves and springs, and its temples were designed to capture and amplify the natural sounds of wind and water, creating a constant, gentle music that promoted meditation and rest. The ancient Greeks also believed in the power of music to bring peace to both mortals and gods. Apollo's lyre could calm the wildest beasts and soothe the most troubled hearts. When he played, even the winds would quiet themselves to listen, and the waves would lap more gently against the shore. His music was said to have healing properties, able to ease both physical pain and emotional suffering. Orpheus, the legendary musician and poet, possessed a gift for music that was even more powerful than Apollo's in some ways. His songs could make trees lean in to listen, could cause rivers to change their course to flow closer to him, and could bring peace to the most savage creatures. When he played his lyre and sang, his voice was described as being like liquid silver, flowing smoothly and bringing comfort to all who heard it. The story goes that Orpheus learned his musical gifts not through struggle or competition, but through patient practice and deep communion with nature. He would sit for hours in quiet meadows, listening to the songs of birds, the whisper of wind through grass, and the gentle babbling of streams. He learned that the most beautiful music comes not from forcing notes, but from allowing harmony to emerge naturally. In the realm of wisdom and learning, the ancient Greeks revered Athena, but not for her warlike aspects. In her peaceful form, she was the goddess of wisdom, crafts, and the kind of intelligence that brings harmony rather than conflict. She was said to have invented the olive tree, giving humanity not just a source of food and oil, but a symbol of peace. The olive branch became a universal sign of peaceful intentions, and olive groves were considered sacred spaces where disputes could be resolved through calm discussion rather than violence. Athena also invented weaving, teaching mortals how to create beautiful textiles that could bring comfort and beauty to daily life. This act of weaving was seen as meditative, requiring patience, skill, and a peaceful mind. The steady rhythm of the loom was compared to the beating of a calm heart. And many Greek women found that weaving brought them into a state of serene focus that was deeply restorative. The ancient Greeks understood that twilight was a particularly magical and peaceful time of day. This was when Hesperus, the evening star, would appear in the sky, signaling the approach of night and rest. Hesperus was considered one of the most beautiful and gentle of all celestial beings. Neither harsh like the noon sun, nor mysterious like the deep night, but perfectly balanced between day and darkness. During the twilight hours, the Greeks believed that the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of the gods became thinner. This was when prayers were most likely to be heard, when dreams began to form, and when the soul could most easily find peace. The soft, golden light of evening was thought to have healing properties, and many people would sit quietly outside during this time, simply breathing in the peaceful energy of the approaching night. The Greeks also told stories of gentle transformations, where mortals became part of the natural world in beautiful ways. Daphne, fleeing from unwanted attention, was transformed into a laurel tree, her arms becoming graceful branches, her hair turning into rustling leaves. Rather than being a tragedy, This transformation was seen as a kind of peaceful escape, allowing her to become one with nature and find eternal serenity. Similarly, the story of Echo tells of a nymph who, as punishment for talking too much, could only repeat the last words she heard. But rather than being a curse, this eventually became a gift. Echo learned the beauty of listening, of being present with the sounds of the natural world, and her voice became part of the landscape itself, adding to the peaceful chorus of wind, water, and wildlife that filled the Greek countryside. The ancient Greeks believed that certain times of the year were especially peaceful and blessed. The season they called the halcyon days occurred during the winter solstice, when the halcyon bird, a type of kingfisher, was said to nest on the sea. According to legend, the gods would calm the waters during this time, creating a period of perfect stillness and mild weather that lasted for 2 weeks. These halcyon days represented the idea that even in the depths of winter, there could be pockets of peace and calm. The image of a small bird nesting safely on perfectly still waters became a powerful symbol of serenity and trust in the natural order of things. During these days, sailors could rest safely in harbor. Farmers could take time to repair their tools and plan for spring, and families could gather around their hearths to share stories and enjoy each other's company. The ancient Greeks also cherished the concept of the Golden Age, a time when humanity lived in perfect harmony with nature and the gods. This wasn't a distant future promise, but a memory of how things once were and could be again. During the Golden Age, people didn't need to work the land because the earth provided everything freely. Fruits grew year-round, honey dripped from trees, and streams flowed with milk and wine. There was no concept of ownership or conflict because abundance was infinite and everyone had enough. The ruler of this golden time was Kronos, not the fearsome Titan who would later devour his children, but Kronos in his peaceful aspect as the god of time and harvest. Under his gentle reign, there were no seasons of scarcity, no need for laws because everyone naturally acted with kindness, and no fear of death because life was so fulfilling that each day felt eternal. People lived for hundreds of years, growing old slowly and gracefully like ancient olive trees, their wisdom deepening with each passing season. This golden age reminds us that the Greeks understood peace not as the absence of conflict, but as the presence of natural harmony. They believed that somewhere deep in human memory lay the knowledge of how to live this way again, and that by connecting with the gentle aspects of the gods and nature, we could touch that golden peace even in our own lives. The goddess Iris served as messenger between the gods and mortals. But unlike Hermes with his quick urgency, Iris moved with graceful serenity. She was the personification of the rainbow, appearing after storms to signal that peace had returned to the skies. Her wings shimmered with all the colors of the spectrum, and where she walked, flowers bloomed in her footsteps. The Greeks saw rainbows not just as beautiful natural phenomena, but as divine promises that every storm would eventually pass and give way to clear skies. Iris carried a golden pitcher filled with water from the river Styx, but she used it not for binding oaths or curses, but for bringing gentle sleep to those who needed rest. When mortals were troubled by insomnia or nightmares, Iris would sprinkle a few drops of this sacred water on their eyelids, bringing them peaceful dreams and restorative sleep. Her presence in the sky was always a sign that the gods were watching over humanity with love and care. The ancient Greeks found deep peace in their understanding of fate and destiny. The three fates, or moirai, were often depicted as frightening figures who controlled the length of human life. But there was a gentler interpretation of their role. Clotho, who spun the thread of life, was seen as a careful craftsperson, taking time to make each thread beautiful and strong. Lachesis, who measured the thread, ensured that each life had exactly the right length to fulfill its purpose. And Atropos, who cut the thread, was understood to do so only when a soul was ready to move on to its next stage of existence. This understanding brought comfort to the Greeks, because it meant that nothing in life was random or meaningless. Every joy and sorrow, every meeting and parting, was part of a larger pattern woven with divine wisdom. Knowing that their lives had purpose and meaning allowed them to face both good times and difficulties with equanimity, trusting that everything would unfold as it should. The sacred ritual of the symposium represented one of the most peaceful and civilized aspects of Greek culture. These weren't wild parties, but carefully structured gatherings where friends would recline on comfortable couches, share food and diluted wine, and engage in thoughtful conversation about philosophy, poetry, and the meaning of life. The symposium was guided by a symposiarch, a master of ceremonies who ensured that the discussion remained harmonious and that everyone had a chance to speak. During these gatherings, participants would often share stories from mythology, recite poetry, or discuss the nature of virtue and happiness. The atmosphere was one of gentle intellectual exploration, where ideas could be examined from all angles without anyone becoming defensive or angry. The Greeks understood that some of life's greatest pleasures came not from excitement or stimulation, but from the quiet satisfaction of good conversation among friends, accompanied by simple food and the soft glow of oil lamps. The concept of the pastoral life held special meaning for the ancient Greeks. They told stories of Arcadia, a mountainous region in the Peloponnese that became synonymous with peaceful rural living. In Arcadian myths, shepherds and shepherdesses lived simple lives tending their flocks, playing music on reed pipes, and composing poetry inspired by the natural world around them. Time moved slowly in Arcadia, measured not by the frantic pace of city life, but by the gentle rhythms of sunrise and sunset, the changing of seasons, and the natural cycles of their animals. The god Pan ruled over this pastoral realm, but in his kindest aspect as the protector of shepherds and their flocks. Pan's music, played on his syrinx or panpipes, could calm frightened animals, guide lost travelers to safety, and inspire peaceful sleep in anyone who heard it. The sound of his pipes drifting across mountain meadows became a symbol of perfect contentment, the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from living in harmony with the natural world. In Arcadian stories, problems were solved not through conflict, but through patience and wisdom. When wolves threatened the flock, Pan would play music that reminded them of their own wild beauty. leading them away to hunt in forests where they wouldn't disturb the peaceful shepherds. When storms arose, the shepherds would take shelter in caves decorated with ancient paintings, telling stories and sharing simple meals until the weather cleared. The ancient Greeks also found great comfort in their belief about the afterlife, particularly the concept of the Elysian fields. This wasn't a place of judgment or punishment, but a peaceful meadow where the souls of the virtuous could rest and enjoy eternal contentment. The Elysian fields were described as being always bathed in golden afternoon light, with gentle breezes carrying the scent of flowers and the sound of distant music. In this blessed realm, souls could pursue whatever brought them the greatest joy. Poets continued to compose verses, musicians played beautiful melodies, athletes engaged in friendly competitions, and philosophers discussed the great questions of existence. But there was no pressure to achieve or accomplish anything. The very atmosphere of the Elysian fields promoted a state of serene satisfaction where every moment was complete in itself. The Greeks believed that sometimes, while dreaming, mortals could visit the Elysian fields and experience this perfect peace directly. These dreams were considered gifts from the gods, providing comfort during difficult times and reminding people that ultimate peace and happiness were not only possible, but assured for those who lived with virtue and kindness. The story of Endymion offers another beautiful example of peaceful, eternal rest. Endymion was a young shepherd of extraordinary beauty who caught the attention of Selene, the goddess of the moon. Rather than pursuing him in a way that would disrupt his life, Selene asked Zeus to grant Endymion eternal sleep so that he would remain forever young and beautiful. Zeus agreed, and Endymion fell into a peaceful slumber that would last forever, lying in a cave on Mount Olympus. Every night Selene would visit him, gazing upon his sleeping form with tender love. This wasn't a story of loss or tragedy, but of perfect preservation. Endymion became a symbol of eternal rest, undisturbed by the troubles of waking life, protected by divine love, and blessed with dreams more beautiful than any reality. The ancient Greeks saw this as an ideal fate, to be so beloved by the gods that one could rest forever in perfect peace. The sacred springs and healing waters scattered throughout Greece were believed to be gifts from the gods, places where mortals could experience divine peace and restoration. The most famous of these was the Castalian spring at Delphi, whose waters were said to inspire prophecy and poetry. But beyond its oracular properties, the spring was known for its incredibly pure, sweet-tasting water that could refresh both body and spirit. Pilgrims would travel from across the Mediterranean to drink from these sacred springs, not seeking dramatic visions or miraculous cures, but simply hoping to experience the gentle healing that came from connecting with divine sources of purity. The ritual of approaching these springs required quiet contemplation and respectful behavior. Visitors would often spend hours sitting beside the water, listening to its gentle flow and allowing its peaceful energy to settle their minds. The Greeks understood that healing often came not through dramatic intervention, but through patient restoration. These sacred waters worked slowly and gently, helping people release anxiety, sorrow, and physical tension. The act of drinking from a sacred spring was as much about the peaceful state of mind required to approach it reverently as it was about any magical properties the water might possess. The ancient Greeks also revered the olive tree as a symbol of enduring peace and wisdom. According to myth, Athena created the first olive tree as her gift to humanity during her contest with Poseidon to become the patron deity of Athens. While Poseidon offered a powerful war horse, Athena offered something that would bring lasting peace and prosperity. The olive tree provided food, oil for cooking and lighting, wood for building, and leaves that became the universal symbol of peace. The Greeks noticed that olive trees grew slowly, but lived for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. They required patient cultivation and gentle care rather than aggressive farming techniques. An olive grove represented the kind of long-term thinking and peaceful intention that created lasting abundance. Families would plant olive trees, knowing that their great-grandchildren would benefit from their labor, understanding that the greatest gifts often come through patient nurturing rather than immediate gratification. The silvery leaves of olive trees created a soft, whispering sound in the breeze that many Greeks found deeply soothing. Olive groves became natural places of meditation and reflection, where the dappled shade and gentle sounds provided the perfect environment for quiet contemplation. The ancient Greeks often made important decisions while walking through olive groves, trusting that the peaceful atmosphere would help them think clearly and choose wisely. As night deepens around you now, these ancient stories of peace and harmony continue to whisper their gentle wisdom. The Greeks understood something profound about the nature of rest and restoration, recognizing that true peace comes not from the absence of all activity, but from being in harmony with the natural rhythms of life. Their gods and goddesses, their sacred places and gentle rituals, all pointed toward the same truth that sometimes the most profound experiences come through simply allowing ourselves to be still, to listen, and to trust in the quiet wisdom that emerges when we stop striving and start simply being. In their mythology, peace wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but something to be received as a gift, like moonlight falling on sleeping shepherds or spring water bubbling up from deep underground sources. The ancient Greeks knew that rest, true rest, was not just a pause between activities, but a sacred state in itself, a time when the soul could remember its connection to the eternal rhythms that guide all life. The Greeks also told of Morpheus, the master of dreams, whose name means he who shapes. Unlike his father Hypnos, who brought sleep, Morpheus painted the landscapes of dreams with gentle artistry. He could take any form, appearing in dreams as loved ones, wise teachers, or comforting strangers who offered exactly the guidance that dreamers needed. His realm was a palace built from horn and ivory, where every room held different types of dreams. From the prophetic to the healing to the simply peaceful, Morpheus understood that dreams served not to disturb sleep, but to deepen it. He would visit those who slept with minds full of worry, weaving dreams that helped them process their concerns in symbolic, gentle ways. A person anxious about a difficult decision might dream of walking through a garden where each path revealed its destination clearly. Someone grieving a loss might dream of their loved one appearing not to cause sorrow, but to offer comfort and reassurance that all was well. The ancient Greeks believed that the most restorative dreams came when Morpheus worked together with the river spirits. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, would wash away the harsh memories of the day, while her sister river Mnemosyne, representing memory, would preserve only those experiences that brought wisdom and peace. This divine collaboration ensured that sleep became a time of sorting and healing, where the mind could release what no longer served while holding on to what nurtured the soul. The sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus was designed as the ultimate place of peaceful healing. Pilgrims would arrive after long journeys, often carrying burdens of illness or emotional pain, and would be welcomed into a complex of buildings designed to promote serenity. The temples were surrounded by gardens filled with medicinal herbs whose fragrances naturally calmed the mind. Sacred snakes, symbols of renewal and healing, moved freely through the grounds, their presence considered a blessing rather than a threat. The centerpiece of the sanctuary was the Great Theater, built with acoustics so perfect that even a whisper from the stage could be heard clearly in the highest seats. But this theater wasn't used for dramatic performances that might excite or disturb patients. Instead, it hosted gentle musical performances, poetry recitations, and philosophical discussions designed to bring the mind into a state of peaceful contemplation. Patients would spend their days in quiet activities, walking through the healing gardens, bathing in sacred springs, and participating in gentle rituals that prepared them for the most important part of their treatment, the dream healing that came during sleep. They would spend the night in the Abaton, a special dormitory where they would lie on beds made of soft wool, breathing air scented with lavender and other calming herbs, waiting for healing dreams to come. The god Asclepius himself was said to appear in these dreams, not as a distant, powerful deity, but as a kind physician who would sit beside the dreamer's bed, speaking in a voice like flowing honey. He might prescribe simple remedies, suggest changes in daily habits, or simply offer the comfort of his presence. Many pilgrims reported waking from these dreams feeling not just physically better, but filled with a deep sense of peace and connection to the divine. The Greeks understood that healing happened not through force or struggle, but through alignment with natural processes. Just as a broken bone heals best when held still and allowed to knit together slowly, they believed that emotional and spiritual wounds required patience, rest, and gentle care. The sanctuary at Epidaurus provided all of these, creating an environment where healing could unfold naturally. In the gentle mythology of the seasons, the Greeks told of Persephone's time in the underworld, not as a period of suffering, but as necessary rest and preparation. During the winter months when she dwelled with Hades, she was said to bring comfort to the souls of the dead, helping them find peace in their new existence. Her presence transformed the underworld from a place of darkness into a realm of quiet contemplation, where souls could reflect on their earthly lives and prepare for whatever came next. Hades himself, in this gentler interpretation, was not a cruel captor, but a thoughtful host who understood the value of solitude and reflection. His realm provided the deep quiet that souls needed to process their experiences and release any lingering attachments to earthly concerns. The pomegranate seeds that bound Persephone to the underworld were seen not as chains, but as symbols of the sweetness that could be found even in periods of withdrawal and rest. When spring arrived and Persephone returned to the surface, her reunion with Demeter represented the joy that comes after a period of necessary rest. The earth didn't burst immediately into full bloom, but awakened slowly, gently, like someone stretching after a long, peaceful sleep. The first flowers pushed through the soil with quiet determination, and the trees budded with delicate, soft colors that spoke of renewal rather than urgency. The ancient Greeks observed that nature never hurried its processes of growth and renewal. Seeds waited patiently in the dark soil until conditions were perfect for sprouting. Fruit trees took their time developing blossoms into fruit, allowing each stage to unfold completely before moving to the next. This natural patience became a model for human life, suggesting that the most beautiful developments came not through forcing or rushing, but through allowing processes to unfold in their own time. The mythology of Apollo included not just his role as the god of music and prophecy, but also his gentler aspect as the god of healing and purification. His temple at Delphi was famous for the oracle, but it was also known as a place where people could come to be cleansed of guilt, sorrow, and spiritual burdens that prevented them from living in peace. The purification rituals at Delphi were not harsh or punitive, but gentle cleansing ceremonies that helped people release whatever was troubling them. Pilgrims would bathe in sacred springs, offer simple gifts of flowers or grain, and spend time in quiet meditation. The priests and priestesses of Apollo understood that true purification came not through suffering, but through returning to a state of natural innocence and peace. Apollo's lyre was said to have strings made from the sinews of cattle given willingly, and its music had the power to align the listener's heart with the harmony of the spheres. When he played, people reported feeling their worries dissolve, their minds become clear, and their hearts fill with a gentle joy that needed no external cause. His music reminded mortals of their divine nature, helping them remember that beneath all their daily concerns lay an unshakable core of peace. The sacred island of Delos maintained its reputation as neutral ground through a simple principle. Anyone who stepped onto its shores was required to leave all weapons and aggressive intentions behind. This wasn't enforced through guards or threats, but through the understanding that the island itself would not tolerate violence. Visitors reported that attempts at anger or conflict simply dissolved in the peaceful atmosphere of the place. The temples on Delos were built to capture and amplify the natural sounds of wind and water, creating a constant, gentle music that promoted meditation and prayer. The architecture was designed not to impress through size or grandeur, but to create spaces that felt nurturing and protective. Courtyards were filled with gardens where sacred doves nested, and fountains provided the soothing sound of flowing water throughout the complex. Pilgrims to Delos often spent weeks on the island, not because any ritual required it, but because they found it difficult to leave such a peaceful environment. Many reported that their sleep on Delos was the most restful they had ever experienced, filled with dreams of flying like birds over calm seas, or walking through gardens where every flower sang in perfect harmony. The ancient Greeks also treasured the stories of the Muses, 9 sisters who inspired all forms of peaceful creativity. Each muse presided over a different art, from poetry to astronomy to dance, but all shared the common purpose of bringing beauty and harmony into the world. They lived on Mount Parnassus in a realm of eternal spring, where the air was always filled with music and the scent of flowers. The Muses were not competitive or demanding goddesses, but patient teachers who worked with mortals to help them express their deepest inspirations. They understood that creativity flowed best in an atmosphere of peace and acceptance, free from the pressure to produce anything impressive or important. The greatest poets, musicians, and artists were those who learned to quiet their minds and listen for the gentle whispers of inspiration that the Muses provided. When mortals called upon the Muses, they would often spend time in natural settings that promoted tranquility. Sacred groves, mountain meadows, and quiet streams were considered the best places to receive inspiration. The Muses were said to prefer working with people who approached creativity as a form of prayer or meditation. Understanding that the most beautiful art came not from personal ambition, but from becoming a clear channel for divine beauty. The story of Pygmalion offers a beautiful example of how patient love could transform even stone into living beauty. Pygmalion was a sculptor who became so devoted to his art that he carved a statue of a woman with such care and attention that she seemed almost alive. He spent months perfecting every detail, not out of obsession, but out of genuine love for the beauty he was creating. Each day, Pygmalion would speak to the statue as if she were real, sharing his thoughts and dreams, bringing her gifts of flowers and beautiful clothing. His love was not possessive or demanding, but gentle and nurturing, the kind of love that asks nothing in return but simply delights in the beloved's existence. Aphrodite, moved by the purity of his devotion, brought the statue to life as Galatea, whose name means she who is milk white. Their love story became a symbol of how patient, selfless love could work miracles. Galatea, awakening to life through Pygmalion's devoted care, represented the idea that love itself was a creative force capable of bringing forth new life and beauty. Their happiness together was described not as passionate excitement, but as deep contentment, the kind of peace that comes when two souls recognize each other perfectly. The ancient Greeks found profound peace in their understanding of the cosmic order, represented by the music of the spheres. They believed that the planets and stars moved in perfect mathematical harmony, creating music too beautiful and pure for human ears to perceive directly. This celestial symphony was thought to be the source of all earthly music and the model for all harmonious relationships. Pythagoras taught that by studying mathematics and music, mortals could begin to understand this divine harmony and align their lives with it. When people lived in accordance with these cosmic rhythms, they experienced a deep sense of rightness and peace, feeling themselves to be part of a vast, benevolent order, rather than isolated individuals struggling against chaos. This cosmic music was believed to be especially audible during certain peaceful times of day and year. The hour just before dawn, when the world was perfectly still, was considered the best time to listen for these celestial harmonies. Many Greeks would rise early and sit quietly in their gardens, allowing their minds to become still enough to catch faint echoes of the music that guided the stars in their courses. The Greeks also told gentle stories about the transformation of sorrow into beauty. The myth of Niobe, who wept so deeply for her lost children that she became a stone fountain, was interpreted not as a tragedy, but as a beautiful metamorphosis. Her tears, flowing eternally from the stone, created a sacred spring where other mourners could come to find comfort and healing. These transformation stories reminded the Greeks that even the deepest sorrows could eventually become sources of beauty and healing for others. Pain was not meaningless or wasted, but could be transformed through time and patience into something that served the greater good. This understanding helped people bear their difficulties with greater equanimity, trusting that even their struggles had purpose in the larger pattern of existence. The sacred ritual of the Amphidromia celebrated the peaceful welcome of new children into the family and community. 5 days after birth, the baby would be carried around the household hearth, while family members offered prayers of protection and gratitude. This wasn't a ceremony of high drama or formal requirements, but a gentle acknowledgement of the miracle of new life and the community's commitment to nurturing and protecting it. The ritual emphasized that children were not the property of their parents, but gifts entrusted to the whole community. Everyone present would make quiet promises to help the child grow in wisdom, kindness, and peace. The baby would be blessed with olive oil and honey, symbols of peace and sweetness, while soft songs were sung to welcome the new soul into the world. This ceremony reflected the Greek understanding that peace began with how communities welcomed and cared for their most vulnerable members by surrounding newborns with gentle rituals and loving intentions. They believed they were planting seeds of harmony that would grow throughout the child's life and eventually contribute to the peace of the whole society. The ancient Greeks understood that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in contentment with simple pleasures. The story of Philemon and Baucis illustrated this beautifully. This elderly couple lived in a humble cottage but possessed hearts so generous that when Zeus and Hermes visited them in disguise, they shared their simple meal without hesitation, treating the strangers as honored guests. Their cottage was poor by material standards, but rich in the things that truly mattered. Herbs grew in their garden, providing both food and medicine. A small vineyard produced just enough wine for their needs. Their furniture was simple but well-made and comfortable. Most importantly, their home was filled with the peace that comes from a long, loving partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. When the gods revealed themselves and offered to grant any wish, Philemon and Baucis asked only to die together, so that neither would have to endure the sorrow of living without the other. This wish was granted, and they were transformed into trees that grew side by side, their branches intertwining for eternity. Their story became a symbol of how the deepest contentment came not from having much, but from appreciating what one had and sharing it generously with others. The Greeks celebrated the gentle wisdom that came with age through their reverence for the elder gods and goddesses in their peaceful aspects. Rhea, the mother of the Olympian gods, was honored not for her struggles during the Titanomachy, but for her patient nurturing of new life. She represented the kind of wisdom that comes from watching many cycles of growth and change, understanding that all phases of life have their purpose and beauty. In her temples, Rhea was depicted surrounded by peaceful animals and flowering plants, her hands extended in gestures of blessing and protection. Worshippers would come to her seeking not dramatic solutions to their problems, but the patient wisdom needed to endure difficult times and the insight to recognize when situations were changing for the better. The rituals honoring Rhea emphasize the importance of taking time for reflection and renewal. Participants would spend hours in quiet meditation, allowing their minds to become as still as deep pools of water. They understood that wisdom often came not through active seeking, but through creating space for insights to emerge naturally, like flowers blooming in their own season. As these ancient stories continue to weave themselves around your consciousness like soft blankets, let them remind you that the Greeks understood something profound about the nature of peace. It wasn't something to be grasped or achieved through effort, but something to be received like rainfall, like the gentle touch of evening air, like the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived. Their gods and goddesses, their sacred places and gentle rituals, all pointed towards the same truth, that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes not through seeking, but through allowing ourselves to be held by forces greater and more loving than we can imagine. The ancient Greeks treasured the quiet rituals that marked the transition from day to night. As evening approached, families would gather to perform simple ceremonies of gratitude and reflection. They would light small oil lamps filled with olive oil, each flame representing a prayer of thanksgiving for the day's blessings. The soft, golden light of these lamps created an atmosphere of gentle warmth that encouraged peaceful conversation and quiet contemplation. Children would be taught to speak softly during these evening hours, understanding that nighttime was sacred to Nyx, the goddess of night, who spread her dark cloak across the sky to bring rest to all living things. Nyx was not feared as a goddess of darkness, but beloved as a mother figure who brought the gift of sleep and dreams. Her chariot was pulled by black horses, whose hooves made no sound as they carried night across the heavens, ensuring that her arrival never startled or frightened anyone. The Greeks believed that Nyx worked closely with her daughter Hemera, the goddess of day, in perfect cooperation. There was never conflict between day and night, only a gentle passing of responsibility from one to the other as Nyx withdrew her cloak each morning. Hemera would arrive with rosy fingers to awaken the world gradually, allowing people and animals to stir naturally from their sleep, rather than being jarred awake by harsh sunlight. This divine cooperation between day and night served as a model for human relationships. The Greeks understood that the most peaceful families and communities were those where different members could take turns leading and supporting, where no one person dominated constantly, and where transitions between activities happened smoothly and naturally. The sacred springs dedicated to the Muses were places where inspiration flowed as naturally as water. These weren't grand fountains or impressive waterfalls, but gentle springs that bubbled up from underground sources, creating small pools surrounded by soft moss and flowering plants. The water was always perfectly clear and cool, and drinking from these springs was said to enhance creativity and bring peace to troubled minds. Poets would make pilgrimages to these springs, not seeking dramatic visions or supernatural experiences, but simply hoping to quiet their minds enough to hear the subtle whispers of inspiration that the muses provided. They would sit beside the water for hours, sometimes days, allowing their thoughts to become as clear and still as the pool before them. Many reported that their best ideas came not during intense effort, but during these periods of peaceful receptivity. The ritual of drinking from a muse's spring required a particular kind of reverence. Visitors would approach slowly, offering a simple gift of flowers or a few drops of honey. They would kneel beside the water and cup it in their hands, drinking slowly while setting the intention to be a worthy vessel for whatever inspiration might come. The act of drinking became a form of communion with the divine source of all creativity and beauty. Musicians who drank from these springs often found that their playing became more fluid and natural, as if the music were flowing through them rather than being created by conscious effort. Painters discovered colors they had never noticed before, and poets found words that seemed to arrange themselves into perfect verses. The springs taught that true artistry came not from struggling to force beauty into existence, but from learning to step aside and allow beauty to express itself naturally. The ancient Greeks also found deep peace in their understanding of hospitality as a sacred duty. The concept of xenia, or guest friendship, was built on the belief that every stranger might be a god in disguise, and therefore deserved to be treated with the utmost kindness and respect. This wasn't just a social custom, but a spiritual practice that transformed both host and guest. When travelers arrived at a Greek home, they were welcomed without questions about their identity or purpose. They were offered food, water for washing, and a place to rest before any conversation about their business began. This ritual of welcome created an immediate atmosphere of peace and safety, allowing both parties to interact from a place of mutual respect rather than suspicion or fear. The host gained as much from this exchange as the guest. By practicing generous hospitality, they aligned themselves with the divine principle of abundance, trusting that their kindness would be returned many times over. Many Greeks believed that their most profound spiritual experiences came through these encounters with strangers, who often brought unexpected wisdom, news from distant places, or simply the blessing of their gratitude. The guest, in turn, was expected to receive this hospitality with grace and humility, understanding that they were participating in a sacred exchange. They would share stories from their travels, offer news from other regions, or contribute their skills to help the household. This mutual giving and receiving created bonds that often lasted for generations, with families maintaining friendships across vast distances and many years. The mythology surrounding the Pleiades, the seven sisters who became stars, offers another beautiful example of peaceful transformation. These sisters were not punished or cursed, but were lifted into the heavens by Zeus to protect them from unwanted pursuit. As stars, they became eternal guides for sailors and travelers, their gentle light providing comfort and direction to anyone who found themselves lost in darkness. The Pleiades were said to be particularly bright, during the seasons when their guidance was most needed, shining clearly during the months when sea travel was safest and fading during stormy periods when it was wiser to remain on land. This natural rhythm taught mortals to pay attention to celestial signs and to work with natural cycles rather than against them. Farmers would plant their crops when the Pleiades rose with the sun, understanding that the stars' position indicated the perfect time for new beginnings. Shepherds would move their flocks to higher pastures when the sisters reached their highest point in the night sky, trusting in the ancient wisdom that connected celestial movements with earthly activities. The story of these star sisters reminded the Greeks that even difficult situations could be transformed into sources of blessing for others. The sisters' beauty, which had caused them trouble on earth, became a gift that guided countless travelers safely home. Their story suggested that what seemed like problems or challenges in one phase of life might actually be preparations for serving a greater purpose. The ancient Greeks understood that certain activities naturally promoted peace and spiritual well-being. Gardening was considered one of the most meditative and restorative practices, connecting people directly with the life-giving forces of the earth. Greek gardens were designed not for impressive display, but for creating small sanctuaries where the soul could find rest and renewal. These gardens typically included areas for growing herbs used in cooking and healing, small shrines to household gods, and quiet spaces for sitting and reflection. The layout followed natural contours of the land rather than imposing rigid geometric patterns, allowing visitors to feel that they were experiencing a cultivated version of wild nature rather than something completely artificial. The Greeks believed that plants had their own consciousness and preferences, and that the most beautiful gardens grew from collaboration between human intention and plant wisdom. Gardeners would spend time simply observing their plants, learning to recognize signs of contentment or distress, and adjusting their care accordingly. This patient attention created a relationship of mutual benefit, where plants thrived under loving care, and humans found peace through nurturing living beauty. Water features in these gardens were kept simple and natural. A small fountain might bubble up from stones arranged to look like a natural spring, or a shallow pool might reflect the sky and surrounding plants. The sound of moving water provided a constant, gentle background music that helped quiet busy minds and promote contemplation. The ritual of the evening meal in ancient Greece was designed to bring families together in an atmosphere of gratitude and peaceful connection. Unlike hurried modern eating, Greek meals were leisurely affairs where conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine that was always mixed with water to promote moderation and clarity of thought. Each meal began with libations poured out to honor the gods and acknowledge the sources of the food being shared. This wasn't a formal religious ceremony, but a simple moment of recognition that the meal represented gifts from the earth, the sun, the rain, and the labor of many hands. This brief ritual helped everyone present shift from the concerns of the day to a state of appreciation and presence. The food itself was simple but prepared with care and attention. Bread was often baked fresh daily, filling the home with warm, comforting aromas. Olive oil, pressed from local trees, provided rich flavor, and the knowledge that the family was connected to the land that sustained them. Fruits and vegetables were eaten at the peak of their seasons, creating natural variety throughout the year and helping people stay attuned to the rhythms of nature. Conversation during meals was encouraged to be harmonious and uplifting. Family members would share the events of their day, but always with an eye toward finding meaning, humor, or wisdom in their experiences. Children learned the art of storytelling by listening to their elders and gradually contributing their own observations and questions. The ancient Greeks also found profound peace in their connection to the cycles of the moon. Selene, the moon goddess, was seen as a gentle presence who watched over the earth during the vulnerable hours of darkness. Her light was soft and silvery, never harsh or overwhelming, providing just enough illumination to comfort travelers and lovers while allowing the rest of the world to sleep peacefully. Different phases of the moon were associated with different types of peaceful activities. The new moon was considered perfect for setting intentions and beginning new projects, when the darkness provided a clean slate for fresh starts. The waxing moon encouraged growth and development, when efforts put forth would naturally expand and flourish. The full moon was a time for celebration and completion, when communities would gather for festivals that emphasized harmony and shared joy rather than wild excitement. These celebrations often took place in olive groves or near sacred springs, where the moon's reflection in still water created an atmosphere of ethereal beauty that inspired poetry and gentle music. The waning moon encouraged reflection and release, when people would take time to let go of old grievances, outdated beliefs, or anything that no longer served their highest good. This wasn't seen as a negative process, but as natural pruning that allowed new growth to flourish in the cycle ahead. The Greeks believed that sleeping under moonlight, particularly during the full moon, could bring prophetic dreams and healing energy. Many would arrange their beds so that moonbeams could fall across them during sleep, trusting in Selene's gentle power to restore both body and spirit during the night hours. The sacred art of storytelling in ancient Greece was understood as a form of healing and community building. Professional storytellers, called rhapsodes, were revered not just for their entertainment value, but for their ability to weave together myth, wisdom, and local experience into narratives that helped people understand their place in the larger pattern of existence. These storytellers would travel from town to town, carrying with them not just tales of gods and heroes, but also news from other regions, practical wisdom about agriculture and healing, and fresh perspectives on eternal questions about the meaning of life. Their arrival in a community was always cause for celebration, as people gathered in the evening to hear stories that would both entertain and nourish their souls. The best storytellers understood that their role was not to impose their own interpretations on the myths, but to serve as clear channels through which ancient wisdom could flow to contemporary listeners. They would often modify details of familiar stories to address the specific needs and circumstances of their audience, while always preserving the essential truths that made the tales timeless and universal. Children were encouraged to listen carefully to these stories, not just for entertainment, but as a way of learning about the values and principles that would guide them throughout their lives. The myths provided models for dealing with challenges, templates for understanding relationships, an assurance that they were part of a larger story that had meaning and purpose. Adults, too, found comfort and guidance in hearing familiar stories told in new ways. The repetition of beloved myths created a sense of continuity and stability, while fresh insights and interpretations kept the ancient wisdom alive and relevant to changing circumstances. The ancient Greeks recognized that certain locations naturally promoted states of peaceful contemplation and spiritual connection. These sacred sites weren't necessarily marked by impressive temples or monuments, but were simply places where the natural environment created conditions that opened the heart and quieted the mind. Mountain meadows where wildflowers bloomed in spring were considered especially blessed. The combination of clean air, expansive views, and the gentle colors and fragrances of wild blossoms created an atmosphere that naturally lifted the spirits and inspired feelings of gratitude and wonder. Many Greeks would make annual pilgrimages to such places, not seeking dramatic religious experiences, but simply allowing themselves to be restored by contact with unspoiled natural beauty. Ancient groves of oak or olive trees were also treasured as sacred spaces. These trees, some hundreds of years old, provided a sense of continuity and permanence that helped people feel connected to something larger than their individual lives. The dappled shade beneath their branches created perfect conditions for meditation, reading, or quiet conversation with friends. Coastal areas where gentle waves lapped against sandy shores offered another type of peaceful sanctuary. The rhythmic sound of water meeting land provided a natural meditation that could quiet even the most anxious minds. Many Greeks would sit by the sea during times of decision or difficulty, allowing the eternal rhythm of the waves to remind them that all troubles were temporary, while the deeper patterns of existence continued unchanged. These sacred places required no special preparations or rituals to access their healing power. Simply arriving with an attitude of respect and openness was enough to begin feeling their beneficial effects. The Greeks understood that the earth itself was a temple, and that some locations were particularly thin places where the boundary between ordinary consciousness and divine awareness became permeable. The practice of dream incubation at healing temples represented one of the most sophisticated understandings of the connection between peace, rest, and restoration in the ancient world. Patients would prepare for their healing sleep through several days of gentle purification, not harsh fasting or extreme practices, but simple activities designed to clear the mind and open the heart to receive divine guidance. These preparations included bathing in sacred springs, eating simple foods that were easy to digest, spending time in meditation among healing plants, and participating in gentle ceremonies that helped release anxiety and create trust in the healing process. The goal was not to force or demand miraculous cures, but to create the optimal conditions for the body's own wisdom to reassert itself. The sleeping chambers in these temples were designed with exquisite attention to creating an atmosphere of safety and serenity. Walls were painted with soft colors that promoted relaxation, and the rooms were scented with herbs known to encourage peaceful sleep and vivid dreams. The beds were comfortable but simple, covered with clean linens that had been blessed by the temple priests. Patients would lie down as evening approached, having spent the day in activities that gradually slowed their minds and prepared them for the receptive state necessary for healing dreams. Many reported that they felt held and protected by invisible loving presences as they drifted toward sleep, as if the very atmosphere of the temple was alive with benevolent intention. The dreams that came in these sacred spaces were often unlike ordinary dreams. They were typically clear, memorable, and filled with practical guidance or symbolic imagery that provided insight into the nature of the person's condition and the steps needed for healing. Sometimes Asclepius himself appeared in the dreams, but more often the guidance came through encounters with wise figures, healing animals, or symbolic scenarios that conveyed their message through metaphor rather than direct instruction. Upon waking, patients would share their dreams with temple priests who were skilled in interpretation. These discussions were not about imposing meaning on the dreams, but about helping the dreamers understand the wisdom their own unconscious minds had received during the night. The emphasis was always on empowering people to become active participants in their own healing, rather than passive recipients of external intervention. The ancient Greeks also understood the healing power of gentle movement and dance. The sacred dances performed at various festivals were not wild or ecstatic, but flowing, graceful expressions of harmony and joy. These dances often mimicked the movements of nature, the swaying of wheat in the wind, the flight of birds, or the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Participants in these dances reported entering states of peaceful meditation while moving, feeling their individual consciousness merge with the rhythm of the group and the larger rhythms of the natural world. The dances served as moving prayers, expressions of gratitude for the beauty of existence, and celebrations of the community's shared values and beliefs. Children were taught these dances from an early age, not as performance skills, but as ways of connecting with their bodies, their community, and the divine presence that flowed through all of life. The dances helped young people learn cooperation, grace, and the joy that comes from moving in harmony with others toward a common purpose. Even elderly people participated in these gentle dances, their movements perhaps slower but no less meaningful than those of younger dancers. The inclusion of all ages in the dance community reinforced the Greek understanding that every stage of life had its own beauty and contribution to make to the whole. The mythology surrounding the constellation Corona, the Northern Crown, tells of Ariadne's transformation from a mortal princess into an eternal symbol of faithful love. After helping Theseus escape the labyrinth, Ariadne was abandoned on the island of Naxos, where she might have remained in sorrow and isolation. Instead, she was discovered by Dionysus, who recognized her noble heart and made her his beloved wife. When Ariadne died, Dionysus placed her crown among the stars as a testament to enduring love and faithfulness. The constellation became a reminder that acts of courage and kindness, even when they seem to go unrewarded in the moment, eventually receive recognition and honor. The gentle light of Corona's stars provided comfort to lovers and reassurance to anyone who wondered whether their good deeds truly mattered. Sailors navigating by starlight would often tell stories of Ariadne's crown during long night watches, using her example to maintain hope during difficult passages. Her transformation from abandoned princess to celestial queen became a powerful symbol that temporary suffering could lead to eternal glory, and that faithfulness in small things qualified one for great honors. The Greeks saw in Corona's circular shape a representation of the eternal nature of true love and virtue. Unlike linear achievements that had clear beginnings and endings, the qualities represented by Ariadne's crown were cyclical and self-renewing, always returning to their source and beginning again with fresh beauty and power. The peaceful wisdom traditions of ancient Greece also included sophisticated understanding of the healing power of music and sound. The Greeks recognized that different musical modes could produce specific effects on the listener's emotional and physical state, and they used this knowledge therapeutically rather than just for entertainment. The Dorian mode was considered particularly calming and grounding, suitable for people who needed to feel more stable and centered. Music played in this mode often featured steady, predictable rhythms that helped anxious minds find their natural equilibrium. The melodies were simple and memorable, creating a sense of familiarity and comfort rather than surprise or excitement. The Lydian mode was thought to open the heart and promote feelings of love and compassion. It was often used during healing ceremonies, or when communities needed to resolve conflicts through understanding rather than force. The gentle, flowing quality of Lydian melodies seemed to dissolve barriers between people, creating an atmosphere where forgiveness and reconciliation could occur naturally. Musicians who worked with healing understood that their role was not to demonstrate their technical skill, but to become transparent channels through which therapeutic sound could flow. They would often spend time in meditation before performing, clearing their minds of personal concerns and setting the intention to serve the highest good of their listeners. The instruments used for healing music were typically simple and acoustically pure. Lyres with strings made from carefully selected materials, flutes carved from sacred woods, and small drums that could produce gentle, heart-like rhythms. The Greeks believed that the simpler the instrument, the more clearly it could convey the essential healing properties of pure sound. These musical healing sessions often took place in natural amphitheaters, where the acoustics had been carefully studied and sometimes subtly enhanced to create optimal conditions for sound therapy. The combination of natural beauty, perfect acoustics, and intentional healing music created experiences that participants remembered for the rest of their lives as moments of perfect peace and restoration. The ancient Greeks treasured the wisdom that came from observing the natural world with patient attention. They noticed that certain animals seemed to possess qualities that humans could learn from, and they developed a rich tradition of animal wisdom that emphasized peaceful coexistence rather than dominance over nature. The dove, sacred to Aphrodite, was revered not just for its beauty, but for its gentle nature and dedication to its mate. Greeks observed that doves settled their disputes through soft cooing rather than aggressive fighting, and that they worked cooperatively to build their nests and raise their young. The dove became a symbol of the kind of love that was nurturing rather than possessive, peaceful rather than passionate. Dolphins were beloved for their intelligence, playfulness, and apparent friendship toward humans. Greek sailors reported countless stories of dolphins guiding ships to safety, rescuing drowning people, and playing alongside boats during long voyages. These encounters reinforced the Greek belief that the natural world was fundamentally benevolent toward humans who approached it with respect and appreciation. The tortoise, associated with Hermes but also valued in its own right, represented the wisdom of patience and persistence. Greeks observed that tortoises lived for many years, moving slowly but steadily toward their goals, carrying their homes with them wherever they went. The tortoise became a symbol of self-sufficiency, contentment, and the understanding that the fastest path to a destination was not always the best one. Bees were particularly revered for their industry, cooperation, and the sweet gifts they provided to humans. Greek beekeepers developed practices that worked with the natural rhythms and preferences of their hives. Rather than trying to force increased production, they understood that the best honey came from bees that were treated as partners rather than as mere sources of profit. As these gentle currents of ancient wisdom continue to flow around your consciousness, carrying with them the accumulated peace of thousands of years, let yourself be reminded that the Greeks understood something essential about the nature of true rest. They knew that peace was not simply the absence of conflict, but the presence of harmony, the deep satisfaction that comes from feeling connected to the eternal rhythms that guide all existence. Their stories and rituals, their sacred places and gentle practices, all pointed toward the same profound truth that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not through effort or achievement, but through learning to receive the gifts that life offers freely to those who approach it with open hearts and quiet minds. The ancient Greeks found profound tranquility in their understanding of the cosmic dance between earth and sky. They observed that certain times of year brought a natural slowing of pace, when even the busiest farmers and merchants would pause to acknowledge the deeper rhythms that governed all life. These weren't enforced holidays or religious obligations, but organic responses to the Earth's own seasonal breathing. During the winter months, when Demeter rested and the fields lay fallow, Greek communities would gather around hearth fires to share the quiet arts that required patience and contemplation. Women would spin wool into thread with movements as meditative as prayer, the steady rhythm of the spindle creating a gentle music that seemed to slow time itself. Men would carve wood or work leather, their hands learning the natural grain and texture of materials that had grown slowly under sun and rain. These winter crafts were never hurried or forced. The Greeks understood that the finest work emerged when the maker's mind was as still as a mountain lake, reflecting the essential nature of the materials without imposing artificial demands upon them. A bowl carved during these peaceful months might take weeks to complete, but it would serve the family for generations, its smooth curves worn by countless hands into a shape that felt perfect against the palm. Children, during these quiet seasons, learned the ancient stories not through formal instruction, but by sitting near the warm glow of oil lamps while their elders worked with their hands. The combination of gentle light, repetitive motion, and familiar voices created an atmosphere where wisdom could be absorbed naturally, like plants drawing nutrients from rich soil. The storytellers of winter spoke in voices barely above a whisper, understanding that the season called for intimacy rather than grand performance. Their tales often featured gentle heroes who won through patience rather than force, lovers who found each other through faithful waiting, and wise figures who solved problems through careful observation of the natural world. The ancient Greeks also discovered deep peace in their rituals of purification. Not the harsh cleansing we might imagine, but gentle processes that helped people release whatever prevented them from feeling connected to their essential nature. These purification ceremonies often took place at natural springs, where the water bubbled up from deep underground sources, carrying with it the earth's own cleansing power. Participants would arrive at these sacred springs not in states of guilt or self-condemnation, but simply with the understanding that life naturally accumulated layers of worry, disappointment, and confusion that needed to be gently washed away. The process was as simple as cupping the clear water in their hands and allowing it to flow over their faces while setting the intention to release whatever no longer served their highest good. The water itself was believed to carry the memory of its journey through layers of stone and earth, gathering wisdom and healing properties as it moved through the deep places of the world. Drinking from these springs was thought to connect people not just with the earth's purifying power, but with the patience and persistence that water demonstrated in its slow movement through rock and soil. After bathing in or drinking from sacred springs, people often reported feeling lighter, clearer, and more connected to the simple joys of existence. Colors seemed brighter, food tasted more delicious, and sleep came more easily. These weren't dramatic transformations, but gentle shifts toward greater harmony with the natural rhythms of life. The Greeks understood that true purification happened not through removing something bad, but through remembering something good that had always been present, but had become obscured by the accumulated dust of daily concerns. The springs simply helped wash away this dust, revealing the natural clarity that was every person's birthright. The mythology surrounding the Hesperides, the nymphs of the evening, speaks to the profound peace that the Greeks found in the daily transition from light to darkness. These gentle beings tended a garden at the western edge of the world, where golden apples grew on trees that sang soft lullabies when the wind moved through their branches. The Garden of the Hesperides was described as a place where time moved differently, where the urgency and anxiety of ordinary life simply could not exist. The nymphs themselves were eternally young, not because they avoided aging, but because they lived so fully in each present moment that they never accumulated the wear and tear that comes from constantly struggling against the natural flow of existence. Visitors to this magical garden, the few mortals who ever found their way there, reported that their first sensation was of profound relief, as if they had been holding their breath for years and could finally exhale completely. The air itself seemed to carry a quality of acceptance and peace that made all worries feel distant and unimportant. The golden apples that grew in this garden were said to grant not immortality in the sense of endless duration, but timelessness. the experience of being so fully present that each moment contained eternity. Those who ate these fruits didn't live forever, but they lived with such depth and appreciation that their lives felt complete regardless of their length. The song of the trees in the Hesperides garden was described as the most beautiful music ever heard, not because it was complex or technically impressive, but because it perfectly expressed the contentment that comes from growing slowly toward the light, drawing nourishment from deep roots, and offering shelter and beauty to all who seek rest beneath protective branches. The ancient Greeks also found great comfort in their understanding of the relationship between memory and forgetting. They believed that both were necessary for a peaceful life, and they honored the rivers Lethe and Mnemosyne as complementary forces rather than opposing ones. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, was seen not as a curse, but as a mercy. Its waters could wash away traumatic memories, old grudges, and painful experiences that served no constructive purpose in a person's current life. The Greeks understood that some memories, like old wounds, needed to heal by being allowed to fade rather than being constantly reopened and examined. Drinking from Lethe was said to bring relief to those who had witnessed terrible events, lost loved ones, or made mistakes that they had learned from but no longer needed to carry as burdens. The forgetting that came from these waters was selective and wise, removing pain while preserving the lessons that suffering had taught. Mnemosyne, the river of memory, preserved what was worth keeping, the moments of beauty, love, and wisdom that enriched life and provided guidance for future decisions. Her waters helped people remember not just factual information, but the deeper truths they had learned through experience, the insights that came from quiet observation, and the connections between seemingly unrelated events that revealed life's hidden patterns. The Greeks believed that the wisest people were those who had learned to drink from both rivers in proper proportion, allowing painful memories to fade while preserving the sweet recollections and hard-won wisdom that made life meaningful. This balance between remembering and forgetting was seen as one of the keys to maintaining peace of mind throughout all of life's inevitable changes and challenges. The sacred art of dream interpretation in ancient Greece was based on the understanding that dreams were not random firings of neurons, but meaningful communications from the deeper layers of consciousness where divine wisdom could be accessed. Dream interpreters, called huneracritics, approached their work not as a mysterious art, but as a gentle craft that could be learned through patient observation and compassionate listening. These interpreters understood that the most helpful dream interpretations were not dramatic prophecies or rigid predictions, but gentle insights that helped dreamers understand their current situations more clearly and make decisions that aligned with their deepest values and aspirations. The goal was always to increase peace and clarity, rather than to create anxiety or dependence on external guidance. Dream interpretation sessions often took place in quiet gardens or beside gentle streams, environments that promoted the relaxed, receptive state of mind necessary for understanding symbolic communications. The interpreter would listen carefully to the dreamer's account, asking gentle questions that helped reveal the emotional tone and personal associations that gave the dream its particular meaning for that individual. The Greeks believed that the most significant dreams often came just before dawn, when the mind was naturally quiet and receptive, but not yet fully engaged with the concerns of waking life. Many people would keep small clay tablets beside their beds, ready to record important dreams before the details faded in the busy activity of the day. These dream records often revealed patterns over time, showing how the unconscious mind was processing changes, working through challenges, and gradually developing solutions to problems that the conscious mind hadn't yet recognized. The practice of recording and reflecting on dreams became a form of gentle self-therapy that helped people stay connected to their inner wisdom. The ancient Greeks also recognized the healing power of what they called sacred silence, periods of intentional quiet that allowed the mind to rest from its constant activity of planning, analyzing, and responding. These weren't empty silences born of having nothing to say, but rich, full quiets that created space for deeper wisdom to emerge. Sacred silence was practiced in many contexts, from individual meditation to group ceremonies where entire communities would sit together without speaking, united in their commitment to creating space for divine presence to manifest among them. These shared silences often produced a palpable sense of peace and connection that participants remembered for years afterward. The Greeks understood that silence wasn't simply the absence of sound, but a positive force that could heal, restore, and inspire. They noticed that certain natural environments, such as deep forests or high mountain meadows, seemed to generate their own silence, a quality of quiet that felt alive and nurturing rather than empty or dead. Temples dedicated to the practice of sacred silence were built with careful attention to acoustics, not to amplify sound, but to create spaces where even small noises would be absorbed and softened, allowing visitors to experience levels of quiet that were impossible in ordinary environments. These temples often featured gardens filled with plants, chosen not for their visual beauty, but for their ability to muffle sound and create pockets of deep stillness. Practitioners of sacred silence often reported that their most profound insights came not during the quiet periods themselves, but in the hours and days following, when their minds, rested and refreshed by the experience of deep quiet, could process information and solve problems with unusual clarity and creativity. The gentle wisdom of the ancient Greeks extended to their understanding of friendship as a sacred bond that required cultivation and care rather than simply developing automatically through proximity or shared interests. They recognized different types of friendship, each valuable in its own way and requiring its own particular kind of attention and respect. The deepest friendships, what they called philia, were based on mutual recognition of virtue and shared commitment to living according to the highest principles each person could understand. These friendships developed slowly, through countless small interactions that gradually revealed character and created trust. They were maintained not through dramatic gestures or expensive gifts, but through consistent kindness, honest communication, and faithful presence during both joyful and difficult times. The Greeks understood that true friends helped each other become better people, not through criticism or pressure, but through the gentle influence of good example and unconditional acceptance. They believed that spending time with virtuous friends was one of the most reliable paths to developing virtue in oneself, as positive qualities seemed to be naturally contagious among people who genuinely cared for each other's well-being. Friendship rituals in ancient Greece were simple but meaningful. Friends might plant trees together, understanding that their relationship, like the growing tree, would develop slowly and provide beauty and shelter for years to come. They might share meals prepared with special attention to each person's preferences, or exchange small handmade gifts that showed thoughtful attention to the recipient's interests and needs. The Greeks also recognized that friendships, like all living things, went through natural cycles of closeness and distance, intensity and quiet companionship. They understood that true friends could maintain their bond even during periods when circumstances kept them apart or when their lives moved in different directions, trusting that the fundamental connection they shared would endure despite temporary separations. The ancient understanding of hospitality extended beyond mere social courtesy to encompass a spiritual practice of seeing the divine in every person who crossed one's threshold. This wasn't based on expecting reciprocal treatment, but on the recognition that offering genuine welcome to others was a way of honoring the sacred presence that lived within all human beings. The rituals of welcome were designed to create immediate safety and comfort for travelers who might have been walking for days through uncertain territory. Guests were offered water for washing before any questions were asked about their identity or business, acknowledging that physical comfort was a prerequisite for meaningful communication and connection. The evening meal shared with guests was considered one of the most sacred activities in Greek household life. Food was prepared with extra care, the best dishes were brought out, and conversation was guided to create an atmosphere of mutual appreciation and learning. Guests were encouraged to share stories from their travels, while hosts offered insights about local customs, history, and natural features that might be helpful or interesting. These exchanges often continued long after the meal was finished, with participants gathered around the hearth fire sharing not just information, but the deeper wisdom that came from their life experiences. Many Greeks reported that their most profound learning came through these conversations with strangers who brought fresh perspectives and unfamiliar ways of understanding familiar problems. The practice of hospitality also included knowing when to give guests privacy and space for rest. Hosts who truly understood the art of welcome provided comfortable sleeping arrangements and then withdrew, allowing their guests to restore themselves without feeling obligated to continue socializing when they were tired or needed solitude. The mythology surrounding Iris, the rainbow messenger, illustrates the Greek understanding of how beauty and communication could be woven together in service of peace and harmony. Iris was said to travel between the realms of gods and mortals, not with urgent demands or harsh commands, but carrying messages of hope, reconciliation, and divine love. Her rainbow bridge appeared most often after storms, serving as a visible reminder that every period of turbulence eventually gave way to clear skies and renewed beauty. The Greeks saw in this natural phenomenon a promise that their own troubles, no matter how severe they seemed in the moment, were temporary conditions rather than permanent states. Iris was depicted as moving with graceful serenity, rather than the swift urgency associated with other divine messengers. Her pace suggested that truly important communications required time to be properly received and understood, and that rushing often prevented the kind of deep listening that allowed wisdom to take root in receptive hearts. The colors of her rainbow were said to represent the full spectrum of divine qualities available to mortals who learned to perceive them. Each hue carried its own blessing, from the deep red of courage and vitality to the soft violet of spiritual insight and compassion. The rainbow's arch reminded viewers that these qualities were not separate or competing, but parts of a unified whole that could be experienced simultaneously by those who opened their awareness to receive them. And now, as these ancient stories settle around you like soft moonlight on still water, let them remind you that the Greeks understood something timeless about the nature of peace, from Hypnos in his gentle cave to the Hesperides tended their singing trees, from sacred springs that washed away worry to olive groves that whispered wisdom in the wind. Every tale we've shared tonight points to the same quiet truth. Rest is not earned through struggle, but received like starlight, freely given to all who simply allow themselves to be held by the eternal rhythms that guide existence. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with golden light.